Firstly, I would like to thank everybody for coming along today. I want to thank the Linen Biennale NI23 for their excellent celebration, a 3-month extravaganza of all things linen. This couldn't have been possible without the continued support from the Heritage Lottery Fund and the Arts Council NI. So, linen, material inheritance. Northern Ireland was a leader in linen manufacture. In its prime, it was sewn, grown and transformed into the finest linen, exporting it all over the world, sought after for its quality and design. Our land was influenced by its presence, whether it be in the retting of the fibre in the rivers or the bleaching of the cloth on the hills. It certainly was an industry. So many of us are connected to linen through our ancestors, but my story is slightly different. I have no known ancestors in the industry. However, I have worked with linen for the past 25 years. For me, there is no better sound than the rhythm of the looms, walking into the mill, the smell, the dust, the overpowering sound of the shuttles, but most importantly, the people. So I didn't directly inherit my passion from family, but is our history something more? Does it reside within my bones from a community and a landscape? Which lets me ask the questions: what are the limitations of inheritance? Can inheritance be limited to a family, or is it a much larger thing? Is it a community residing within each of our bones? So what I'm going to do is take you through some of the work that I've been completing and my past. So I left college and went straight to Moygasha Limited. Didn't know at the time, but it was one of the best linen mills that there was. It covered interiors and apparel fabrics. This was a collection that I completed for them in the year 2000. This ended up being a huge collection for the hotel industry. It was all printed on linen, and it was particularly special because of, one, the design. When you think back in 2000, they were still very much in florals, so to produce something that was almost Rothko inspired, and the scale of the design was absolutely huge, so it was really new and really exciting for the time. Then I moved on to Ulster Weavers, and here I worked with the apparel sector. So this is just a couple of images here to let you see how we developed fabrics. So the one on the left-hand side is maybe what we would have done for a customer. Say we had Jigsaw came along, and we would have spoken to Jigsaw, had consultations with them, and then we would have produced a small collection for them to choose what they wanted to go forward with in bulk. It also lets you see, the one on the right hand side also lets you see how heavy we could make that linen by adding in other yarns. Now the one on the right hand side is not 100% linen, but it does allow you to see that we can really create texture and form as well. I also have done a lot of consultation work for other companies, Hainsworth and Atkinson and Emblem Weavers, just to name a few, and that would be with colour, design, fabric, and other inspirational things. So really with linen today, I wanted to focus a bit on the gallery work that I've done. So this selection of work was linen combined with technology. I wanted to use the gold foil and I wanted to laser cut the linen. So what I did to create these designs was I maybe layered 6 or 8 layers of linen, laser cut them, and then gradually peeled away so that it gave a whole different dimension to the linen. This little piece was added into the book by Kathleen Curtis. It's Irish People, Irish Linen, and it's called Releasing Eve. It's a combination of the history of the mills, the Troubles, and how we were going to move forward. So it's a combination of print, laser cutting, and imagery. And what you can see on the right-hand side, which I also thought was very nice, is when I peeled away the linen and the design, what was left on the paper and the board afterwards of the burning and the techniques that was used with it. This piece is actually in the Arts Council collection. In 2011, I did a collection with Derek Wilson, who's a ceramicist. For this, we wanted to do a collaboration to explore the idea of table linen. So what we did was take old damask designs and we reimagined them for a new contemporary table setting. So this was shown at the Biennale Internationale in Portneuf. Here in the Linen Biennale 2018, I had a collection of chairs. Again, the base of the chairs, or the print base, was linen. What I wanted to do here was create a collection that best described how it was being a girl brought up in the 1980s. So in Armagh, if I give a little bit more context to it, in Armagh there was two girls' schools. Both girls' schools had exactly the same uniform, and the only thing different was their tie. So I created this collection called Different Buses, and it was called Different Buses because we were so similar, right down to, you know, internal organs, the uniform, shirts, everything, apart from the tie, except we had to get different buses home. So this was a real exploration of the Troubles at the time. This has also gone into the Arts Council collection. For Linen Lab Connected in 2019, this was a collaboration. It was to introduce linen into schools to allow them to understand its importance historically by creating new contemporary work. So we collaborated with artists and various different types of people in crafts and industries at the time. I combined the laser cutting again and using historical stories to complete pieces for an exhibition. And the Linen Biennale 23, August past, I'm sure some of you were able to make it, I produced Connected Emotions. So for this project, I have been working with Queen's University Belfast. What we are doing here is we are trying to find out if there is a relationship between emotional words and design characteristics. So if you can see the two pockets, there was a sculpture, a textural sculpture in the centre which was made out of linen. The sculpture itself had 18 pockets in it. Each pocket had 3 design characteristics, and then we asked people to come in and take part and place emotional words into each pocket. So from the results that we had collected at a previous time in the study, towards the outside of the gallery then we put around some of the results that we have gathered so far. And what we're finding is that there actually is a subconscious connection between pockets and there are certain design characteristics and emotional words. So I would just like to say thank you very much. I'm delighted now to introduce 2 amazing speakers that we have today. They're going to focus on linen, of how their heritage has influenced them and their creativity and connected them with the work that they produce. So first up we're going to have Laura. Laura Wilson is a visual artist who has exhibited worldwide. Laura is passionate about how history is carried and evolved through everyday materials and craftsmanship. Laura researches relationships between materials, memories, and knowledge, creating a body of sculptural and performative works. And if I just before Laura comes up, I'm just going to say, if we are to make progress, we must not repeat history, but make new history. We must add to inheritance left by our ancestors. So Laura's now going to discuss how that has influenced her.
So I thought it would be helpful to kind of talk through a few different works, and then I'll end with talking specifically about a linen, how I got kind of into linen, and an exhibition that I had earlier in the year at CCA Derry Londonderry. But this work that's on screen at the minute, I often find is quite a good work to start with as a way in, even though it was a work that I did quite a long time ago. But it's called Brick Exchange, and I made it between 2007 and 2010. But in a way it kind of introduces how I tend to work with different people, and how my work kind of evolves. So I was born in Northern Ireland. I'm based in London. I studied sculpture at St Martin's, like the pulp saw. And I make sculpture, performance, drawings, videos, and a lot of the work that I make often involves working with other people, so that's often across discipline, and in the past 10 years or so that's involved working with architects, archaeologists, bricklayers, dancers, designers, scientists, lots of different people, and I tend to kind of set up those collaborations and working relationships, and then I often return to them again in different works, and the conversations continue. But this work that's on screen is called Brick Exchange, and I went to college at St Martin's, and a few years after I graduated I was approached by some curators from Belgium who were putting on an exhibition in Belgium, in Flanders, on an archaeological site called Inama, that was the site of an old Benedictine abbey. And they were really interested in doing this sort of outdoor exhibition on basically ruins, and they had been doing a lot of research into the history of St Martin's, and there was a period in the 70s in the college's history called the Locked Room, where they basically, it was two artists who were tutors, and they every day brought their students into the studios, and they would give them one material and tell them to make something with it. So it was kind of about this push of the material, see what you could do with it, and they weren't allowed to use anything else. So those were the kind of rules of the studio. And so I suppose the curators were interested in taking the archaeological site as this material, and also in working with students who'd been graduates of St Martin's. So anyway, so I got invited to participate in this exhibition, and I am really interested in history, and the history of places, the history of the land and how we use it. Because I did a lot of research into what the archaeological site was before. So it was a Benedictine abbey that had been demolished, and a lot of the building materials had been sold off as rubble and had been scattered across Europe. But some of it still was on site that was used for doing repairs on the archaeological site. But I was quite interested in this idea of the brick, and the idea that bricks are something that are human in scale. They're basically, from the ground, they're clay that's compacted. And then a culmination of bricks can make something, and they're also very portable too. So you could put a brick in my bag and kind of carried it around to different places. And anyway, I went at the beginning, when I was researching for the exhibition, I went to the old St Martin's site where I went to college, and they were actually demolishing a brick wall. It was during the summer term. And the building was where the Sex Pistols had their first gig, but it was also where Gilbert and George went to college. It had quite a history within it. And so I took a brick from there, and it was a 1950s Marsden brick made in England, and it's the white one which is at the corner of this structure. And I brought that with me to Belgium, and then went to Belgium for the exhibition, and I worked with local bricklayers who taught me how to lay bricks. I also worked with the archaeologists and other local people to mix up a particular type of mortar that I would be able to use to build a structure on top of the abbey's foundations. So that's what this structure is. So it's a kind of sculpture that remained in place for the duration of the exhibition. And the foundation stone for the structure was the brick from the St Martin's building. And the structure was built as high as we could physically build it as well, because we couldn't use scaffolding or anything like that because of conservation. That's me with red hair, by the way. So at the opening of the exhibition, I did a brick exchange with the mayor of the town, who's the guy with the tie, and he just finished eating a hot dog, and but it was the opening of the exhibition, and he and the mayor of the town and the curator of the museum, which is the lady on the left, and together we signed a contract that basically gave me permission to exchange my brick from London with a brick from the Benedictine Abbey ruins, and I took that brick with me back to London. So London Bricks in Belgium, and on the train back with me came the smaller brick, which is a Flemish brick. And I then worked with, at the period of time that I was going back, St Martin's was all moving to King's Cross in behind the station, if anybody's familiar with the area. And I then worked with the college and with the architects and the building kind of contractors to build the Benedictine Abbey brick into one of the heritage brick walls, which was built by Lewis Cubitt in the St Martin's building. So it's now kind of remained in there, and another contract was then signed to say that brick was in place. And those two contracts are part of the collection at UAL, or University of Arts London. So I suppose for me it was this way of kind of translating history across many centuries, but also this kind of collapse of time and the fact that and the learning of skills of the brick making and the bricklaying. And then, so the next work that I kind of is sort of semi-related, but it was many years later. I was invited, so I've been kind of, since I did that work, brick project, I've been researching bricks and doing a lot of other kind of quite research-developed works. And then in 2018, I was commissioned by New Geographies, which was this big kind of commissioning programme that was across the east of England, and 10 artists were selected to respond to sites across the east of England which were kind of forgotten sites. They were nominated by the public, and I responded to a site which was basically, it was a viewpoint in the Fenlands which just looked over the countryside, but the Fenlands is seen to be very, very flat, and so I was quite interested in this idea of flatness of land, and a lot of the land is used for farming, and but I had just been doing another project which was working with an archaeologist, and I've been having a lot of conversations about the body and also about the idea of craft work. And Dr. Melanie Giles, this archaeologist that I was working with, suggested that I get in touch with an archaeologist called Mark Knight, who is the head of the Cambridge Archaeological Unit. And he'd just been, and currently is still working on, a huge archaeological dig, which you may have heard of. There was a BBC programme on not that long ago, which if you haven't seen it, is actually very interesting. But it's the archaeological site is called Must Farm, and it was uncovered. It's right beside a brick factory, which is weird that I was kind of then working back in a brick factory. But this site was discovered on the edge of a working brick quarry, and it was a Bronze Age settlement that went on fire. So this is like 4,000 years ago. It went on fire and collapsed into the flatness of the Fenlands. So nobody knew it was there. They thought it was there was no interesting archaeology in the Fenlands. And a farmer who was digging one day found a post sticking up, and asked his friend down the road, who was a local archaeologist, I think he was actually a member of Time Team, to come and have a look at this post. And from then on, they've been doing this dig. But it's seen today as an equivalent of the UK's Pompeii, in that the archaeology is so well preserved The archaeological site was a series of, or where the Bronze Age settlement was a series of roundhouses, and they basically, you can just see it's just gone straight into the ground there. And what interests me about the site and why I wanted to work and research it is that it had such an incredible evidence of the people that once lived there. The fact that you could almost touch those people. They found vessels that were completely intact in the ground. That have been, many of them, you can see where they've been kind of moulded by the hand. They had a lot of spindle whorls. They found full kind of yarns that had been wound, and a lot of Bronze Age fabrics, which is very, very unusual for a Bronze Age settlement, because it would just have disintegrated. But the fact that the fenlands is so it's quite waterlogged. It had basically preserved it in the same way that a lot of wood would have been preserved as well. And they found that because there's a lot of log boats, they could tell by the dendronology that the site had been kind of erected and then dismantled and on fire within a year, which is quite interesting, I think, in terms of like a cycle of people's time and a cycle of a year and seasons and things like that. So I worked for 2 years with Mark Knight and his team of specialists, which included people working with the vessels, the pots, people who were specialists on growing the food that they would have grown there, but also the textile specialists as well. And that was something that I was particularly interested in. The thing that also is quite unique about the site, because it's on the edge of a working brick quarry, it affords the archaeologists this kind of continual research. It means that as they have this amazing symbiotic relationship, that as the clay is dug for the bricks, the archaeologists are in there kind of at a smaller level, kind of digging and revealing kind of more and more layers of this ground, of this earth. And it's just revealing more and more information than has ever been able to kind of be revealed in terms of the Bronze Age, which I think is kind of quite fascinating. So this is me on site with Mark, and I basically went and I worked very closely with his team, but also with the brick quarry workers as well. So riding around with Alan, who was the guy in charge of the quarry, so the work kind of evolved over the course of 2 years, and as part of that research, I also learnt to weave, which I'll go on to later. But I suppose for me, learning to weave at that point through that project was also to really, really understand what those people on the site in Must Farm would have been doing. So like the cloth that was found in the archaeological site was almost as fine as the fabric that you would find on your jeans today. I mean, the threads are so well preserved, and so I learned to weave as part of that, which I'll kind of come on to in a minute. But I suppose I at that time was really interested. I thought, maybe I'll try and like weave fabrics or weave costumes, and as I mentioned, I work in performance, so. The work kind of took a slightly different route, and I always feel like things are always sitting at the back of your mind. But the work that I developed in the end was a performance called Deep, Deep and Deepening. This is an image from the performance. It involved 12 movement artists, many of them that I've collaborated with before on previous works. I designed the costumes in collaboration with Lucy Kordakova, who I have worked with many times as well before on costumes for other works, and made these performance tools, which are based on hods that would have carried the bricks, and they're kind of used in the choreography of the performance, as well as sort of reading stands. And the performance, so it was presented in the quarry, in the very base of the quarry, to an audience, a small audience of about 30 people, and there were 3 performances across the day. And the performance was filmed, and it's then documented in a film called Deepening, which I'm not going to show today because it was quite long, but it documents the performance itself, the choreography, and also there's a sequence in the film where I was allowed to I had some of the performers handling the vessels that were excavated from the ground, and so they are passing them from one person to another in shot in the screen. So that work was, the film was then exhibited at Norwich Castle Gallery as an exhibition, and that was presented alongside the vessels, which were on loan from Cambridge Archaeological Unit, and the performance tools as well. I then exhibited the film earlier this year at CCA Derry, Londonderry, which was a solo exhibition, ran from the end of March this year until the beginning of June. And so for me, growing up in Northern Ireland, it was a really exciting thing to be back here and to be presenting my work and work here. And be with family as well, and the work that I showed was deepening, so the film, and for the first time that was exhibited alongside a new kind of sculptural installation of the performance tools and also the costumes, which were displayed as sort of sculptural objects. In the other gallery, I showed a work which was commissioned by the Landmark Trust in 2021. So I was invited by the Landmark Trust, who, if you haven't heard of the Landmark Trust, they're basically similar to the National Trust, but they kind of take over buildings and renovate them and kind of honour their heritage in a way. Do a lot of dry stone walling, but you can stay in the properties as well. But they invited me to make a piece of work for one of the oldest inhabited buildings in Wales. And it was an old threshing barn. And so I was really interested in looking into the history of wheat, but also this history of how the land was used. I worked with someone locally who had been growing wheat and had been threshing their own wheat to make flour and then to make bread. So he taught me how to thresh, and I then developed a choreography with the performers, which I filmed and was then presented back in the space. But again, these costumes that are in the work were designed with Lucy Kordakova, who I've worked with many times, and then those were displayed alongside the film as well at CCA, along with the tools as well. And I suppose this is when I was starting to kind of bring in aspects of weaving as well into the work. So the costumes here feature these sort of woven panels as well. Just to kind of to introduce the work that is that was in the first room of CCA, which featured the work that I've basically been making over the last two years. Which is around completely kind of researched around linen. So as I mentioned, I learnt initially how to weave as part of my research into Must Farm, because I really wanted to understand this process, and a lot of the way that I work is very much kind of working with people, trying to understand these techniques, and often I think it's things that you don't really understand by reading a set of instructions. So if you've ever woven before, it is that you do have to kind of have a grip with the material to kind of understand the weight of something and how it moves, how your body moves in relation to that. And I suppose for me, that's kind of how I've approached other kind of work. So for example, learning how to make bricks or how to knead bread is kind of, it's this kind of tussle between the body and the material, and learning, when things don't work and how you resolve those yourself as well. So I, in 2021, was awarded the Dover Prize, and that enabled me to buy a loom and to also give me time in the studio to to learn how to weave, and I contacted the person who had initially taught me how to weave. Her name is Claire Whelan. She's an amazing weaver, and her family's actually Irish, and a lot of them are linen weavers. And so she agreed to mentor me kind of across this kind of journey back into weaving again. And I chose to exclusively weave in linen, particularly because I was really interested in linen as a material, the history of linen, how it's grown, the fact that it's so sustainable, but it's also resists mildew, bacteria, it's very strong. And I think also its relationship to history and how it's grown, and the fact that, you know, in the previous works that I've made, for example in Must Farm, it would have been particularly some of the fibres that the clothes would have been grown out of, the flax would have been used. And then obviously my own personal connection to linen, coming from Northern Ireland. Also the Dover Prize is awarded from, it's sort of based in Darlington in England, North England. And Darlington also has quite a rich history and connection to linen. There's a big mill called Pease's Mill, which is in Darlington, and also they were very famous for bleaching linen along the river. So I kind of, for me, wanted to sort of connect these two things together. Along the way, shortly after I was awarded the prize, I think it was sort of on just after a lockdown or something like that, but I got very absorbed into Ancestry.com and discovered that my family on my mum's side were all linen weavers, so a generation or two back, and she didn't know that at all. So for me that felt like quite an exciting thing to learn more about, but also I suppose for me, whenever I was initially learning to weave, which would have been like in 2019, I suppose for me there was something that was still there. Maybe it was within my body, or I don't know, that kind of, a feeling that I needed to go back to it somehow. So I'm glad I did. So for CCA, I displayed several works. So I had these pieces. So these are basically my test pieces for learning and how to teach myself the process of weaving. So testing out the different weaving structures, thicknesses of yarn, working a little bit in coloured yarns as well. So this is displayed on cedar. And then this is just some close-up images of, I mean, you'll be able to see my mistakes if anybody's a weaver, so apologies for that. But I am still learning. But I think for me it was also about, discovering when things break and that tension and so on. And then there's this piece as well, which is called Winding Then Winding, or Winding Then Winding. And I was still, so this piece I made between January and March. It was completed a week before the exhibition opened. And I had a baby at the beginning of the year, in early January, and was completing this work whilst nursing him, and I had the loom kind of in the middle of my sitting room. In fact, whenever I was having contractions, I was trying to make the warp for this. But I think for me, it was also, while I found out I was pregnant whilst I was kind of learning this skill of weaving as well, so it's kind of become kind of entwined somehow within the work. The fact that, this kind of generational thing of kind of finding out about weaving on my mum's side and then becoming a new mother myself too. And so each time that I came back to the loom, I would change the warp, the yarn or the weaving structure, so that you can see, I suppose it's the sort of passage of time as well, from him sleeping or not sleeping and so on. So this is just some close-up images of that. And then in the space I also had my loom, and on the first day of the exhibition I started weaving a piece of linen with my mum. Now my mum had never learnt how to weave, she wasn't a weaver, and so for me it was also kind of about somehow passing on of these skills to her. so that was on the first day of the exhibition, and then the weaving was then continued by weavers in Northern Ireland who were invited to come and weave in this space. So so there would be also this kind of sound of the loom being kind of beaten, and this growing of the piece of linen as well. So yeah. So that's so I'll end there. And yeah, thank you.
Hey, so I am Amy, and I am going to chat a little bit about my brand, Kindred of Ireland. So I graduated like 7 years ago now from the University of Ulster, and I studied the textiles and fashion course there, and I went on to create Kindred, which kind of came about quite organically. And my final collection at uni was all kind of based around that, and after that there was someone who had viewed my final collection at the final year show, and she owned a shop and asked to buy a few pieces for her shop, and it sold really well in there. So that's kind of how briefly it all came around, but I'll get a little bit more into it. So so at Kindred of Ireland we make luxury linen with heritage and heart. So we believe so much in the skills and craftsmanship that has been passed down through generations, and I believe there's something so beautiful about harnessing that knowledge of the past and using that in a way to create kind of new innovations and build on the secrets and the skills of our ancestors. So yes, for us, Kindred is about belonging to something bigger than ourselves. It's about owning our heritage in the linen industry, connecting with our ancestors and protecting a positive legacy. And we take the time to reflect on our values and live by them, handcrafting sustainable pieces that tread lightly, putting into practice our beliefs that fashion can be slow, that old techniques can be reimagined, and that the present can harness the power of the past. How do I click on this? Oh, sorry, I was figuring out how to use this. So where it all kind of began, as I said, during my final year of uni, I had the opportunity to create a final collection in what I kind of specialised in, which was pattern cutting and knitwear. So I kind of, at the start of the year, you had this period of time where you can figure out what you kind of want your collection to kind of speak to, and what you kind of want your inspiration to be. And during that time, I was chatting with a great uncle of mine who had worked in the linen industry all his life, and I guess I had kind of grown up around that kind of knowledge and the stories that he would have passed on, but had never really kind of gone there and dwelt on it and kind of thought about how that could be relevant to me. But one random night I was going through some old pictures of my dad and things that he had kind of thought would be interesting, and I came across this newspaper cutting of my grandmother, who I actually never met. She died a long time ago when my dad was very young, but it was this moment where I seen this picture, and this is in Moygashill Mill, and she was working there, and it was like a newspaper article kind of talking about how Moygashill linen was going all over the world, and it was just that kind of light bulb moment for me where I was like, this is really connected to me, and there was something kind of deep in it that kind of happened in me at that time, and so that was what I kind of based my whole final collection on. It was a collection that was kind of all pure white, tones of white, and it focused a lot on lace work through the kind of knitwear and crochet and all of that, and it was really the point of the collection was to kind of really tell that story of our heritage and my own kind of connection to it. And so really that final collection probably was kind of where Kindred began, although I didn't know it at that time. And so the mission, I'm just going to touch a little bit on the mission, which I kind of have, but to harness the power of the past and to we exist to breathe new life into a heritage, our heritage, and honouring those kind of traditions and techniques through new innovations. So Jill had mentioned that part of what I do is to kind of think about the linen in new ways. So we use techniques like quilting. In one of our first collections, we use beetle linen, which is a really old process, where the linen is dampened and pounded with wooden blocks over the course of days to create this sheen. It kind of like shrinks the fibres in the linen and creates this sheen. So when you look at it, you wouldn't necessarily think that it is linen. It's actually more like a leather or something. But so it was once I kind of discovered that, I was like, this is actually really interesting. You know, that this is a really old process, but it's something that I can, by adding things like quilting and new kind of textures to it, you can kind of really think about linen in a way that is not as traditional. As like when you look at that, you know it's linen. But for example, when you look at the silver jacket in front of me, you wouldn't necessarily think that is linen. So that's what really excites me about kind of harnessing those skills and thinking about them in new kind of innovative ways, and almost when you which I have kind of limited Kindred to one fabric, it just means that limitation almost kind of like makes you push boundaries and really think about new ways and to kind of innovate and use it. So, and it's also really fun to collaborate with like the mills. So the beetle linen comes from a mill in Upperlands near Macrofeld called William Clark, and I work quite closely with the creative director there, who has a real kind of passion for what I kind of feel passionate about, and it's just really fun to kind of like to feel that you are almost kind of like breathing new life into those kind of old traditions and keeping that alive. And so yeah, that's what really excites me. So yes, one of our values, upholding craftsmanship. So a central value at Kindred is to keep things local. So every piece is thoughtfully brought to life here in Ireland by our local seamstresses and Irish crochet artisans. In an age of, we'll probably talk about this a lot, the kind of sustainability point of view, but in an age where things are kind of mass produced, I think it is, there is a real desire definitely among like my generation to really know where clothes have come from, how it's kind of been made. There's just a real kind of interest in that, definitely, that I find that there probably wasn't even like kind of 3 to 5 years ago. I feel like people are really kind of interested in that now. And so our model is that we use mostly kind of freelance seamstresses. We have a couple of seamstresses who are based in our studio in Belfast, but for the most part we kind of use a freelance model. And a lot of like the seamstresses that I work with kind of like have young kids, and they enjoy that kind of working from home and the flexibility that it kind of affords them. And actually, like historically, that was a real kind of thing. Like years ago, like mums would have been at home, like they would have taught their kids to kind of make Irish lace and all of that. So it's almost that like a kind of a new way of thinking about how things were done kind of years ago. And I quite like that kind of, that almost like that full circle. And that's just kind of a model that I think really works. So one of our other values is giving back. So so our dedication to sustainability intertwines with our mission of social value of giving back to our community. And so we actually partner with a local charity, I don't know, like some of you might have heard of them, but they're called Flourish NI, and they provide long-term support for survivors of human trafficking, kind of providing that kind of long-term aftercare support when they have kind of gone through things like Women's Aid and all of that. They kind of help them to build their lives back up, kind of get back out into society and learn skills and apply for jobs and all of that. So we partner with them, and that's something that is really kind of it kind of goes to the heart of almost like all decisions that we kind of make. So back whenever Kindred started, we partnered with them in a sew and skill program that so we made like a linen tote bag. That was kind of the product. It was partnering with their kind of social enterprise, and as part of that, there was like a whole thing around teaching them to, because many of their clients wouldn't have like very good English, so kind of teaching them to write CVs and all of that kind of thing, preparing for interviews and that kind of upskilling. So that's like a real kind of value of ours, and as well as that, when you think about sustainability and kind of keeping things local, there's something in that kind of we know our supply chain kind of inside out, and in terms of like slave labour and all of those awful things that happen in the fashion industry, like kind of worldwide, it's that thing of really that thing like every single person has like such value and worth, and really kind of that goes to the core of kind of our values as a brand and how we kind of do things. And so probably one of the bigger visions for Kindred is that we would kind of use more or like enable more Flourish's clients to kind of be able to sew for us, so, as many of them actually have like skills as seamstresses, but because of the whole kind of asylum seeker, like refugee status thing, many of them can't work. So one of the kind of bigger visions is and we actually did just recently employ one of the Flourish's clients who got a refugee status and can be employed now. So I actually just left her in the studio there, and she's working away like just loving her life. And it's a whole idea of how like kind of creativity can be really healing, and that kind of like using your hands and creating something start to finish, and there's that whole aspect too. So that's a huge kind of value of the brand, and something that we really kind of want to build on as well. Yes, and so sustainability and innovation, of course, are really kind of important, and I've touched on that with our kind of supply chain, and everything is made here, and that's actually something probably that it feels like we've really kind of had to fight for, in terms of kind of scaling the business up and kind of making things in more kind of bulk. It's actually it's proven quite difficult to keep things local, and kind of there's no real kind of factories here to kind of go and get things made in bulk. So it's something that definitely has probably caused me the most headache, because I can see probably the appeal in kind of going overseas and getting things made, and it also, like, our production cost is much higher than if you kind of went down that route, but it is something that, like, to our core we believe in, and also just that thing of really reviving that heritage and what, like, our past, which is actually not really, like, it's not like it's like hundreds of years ago, all this kind of stuff just died out really quite recently, so it does feel quite important to kind of do our bit to really kind of revive that. And yes, from Flax to Fabric, we're passionate about transparency in our supply chain, and also Laura kind of touched on it, but linen is like, in terms of a sustainable fabric, it's probably one of the best. It requires little water and to kind of grow the flax plant, and in terms of actually how it wears, like, it gets stronger even as you wash it, and it's just, in terms of like a sustainable kind of choice of clothing, it's just really great, and it's really just nice to wear on your skin as well. And also working with local family-run mills, which is really a really lovely kind of aspect of what we do, and being able to work closely with people is just, it's a really kind of lovely thing. And so, the beadle linen, so that's just an image of the beadled linen quilted, which just kind of goes to the core as well of the brand, and just that idea of really pushing boundaries. So this one's quilted, so again, it's that thing where you look at that and you probably wouldn't think that it's linen, and that's kind of, I guess, what makes it interesting. And then more recently we have experimented with screen printing like metallics onto linen and then beadling it to give it that kind of sheen, and that's what you can see in the silver jacket as well. And then we have a gold jacket that sells really well as well. People really love it, and it kind of has almost like an antique kind of finish to it. And it was in the first slide. But again, that kind of unexpected kind of aspect, and thinking about linen in new ways is again what really kind of gets me up in the morning. And that's the gold coat that I'm talking about. So and this collection, so our most recent collection is kind of really like doubling down on that again, and that whole aspect, like that whole thing of merging the old with the new. So we have like some more colours of metallics, and we have like the silver and like a pinky colour kind of coming out for autumn winter too, and also so merging those. We have a few pieces that we have like the really traditional kind of lace work and the Irish crochet like alongside the metallic. So when you look at it, it feels like it really tells that story of from kind of like the really more traditional kind of aspects to the really new kind of innovative side. So that's really all I have to say, and I hope you enjoyed.
Hi, thank you. There was a couple of things. Firstly, thank you very much for coming and speaking. Both really informative and really excellent hearing about both your work. I love the way how they're so very different, yet there's common threads running through them, not only just with the linen, but probably how you think and you create. One of the questions I had was, I feel it is important to own our heritage, consciously or subconsciously. It has had an impact on us. How has heritage impacted on your design process and how you create? And if we go to Amy first for that, thanks.
Yeah, I guess like I did kind of touch a bit on this, but I think that kind of heritage aspect, obviously I really believe in that, and that's kind of really like the core of what I've kind of built with Kindred. But it does, it really informs, like it deeply informs that kind of design process. So as I said, like most of our kind of pieces will speak of that real kind of traditional and like all those traditional skills and the kind of history that we have, but almost like kind of thinking about that in a new way and marrying it with something that feels fresh, like the metallic beetling, for example, and kind of keeping that, like setting that alongside something more traditional like Irish crochet, that kind of thing. So I think that is the question. I think it's really important, and it is just that thing of really like not letting those kind of like traditions and that kind of craftsmanship die like with a generation. I think it's like while you kind of have those kind of older people around who like I still have my great uncle around, for example, who can kind of talk to me loads about how things were done years ago, and I think there's something I think really special about really kind of capturing that and not letting that kind of legacy of what people kind of built kind of die out with the generation. So I love that side of things and that continuity of that, bringing it, like making it new and fresh.
And Laura, for you then, you seem to have that quite apparent within your work. What I love about yours is that you've gone through different types of mediums, so everything is always fresh and new. But if you could just give a little quick answer to that question as well, that'd be great. Thanks.
I suppose for me, as I talked about, like I'm really interested in history, and particularly how those things are, how information is passed from one person to another. So. And how we learn skills and how that's passed through generations, and a lot of my work has been to do with different types of labour or learning skills, and me learning those skills, and obviously in the last project that I spoke about, it was particularly connected with my family. But I think also one of the things that I'm really interested in is that many of those skills are things that have been done for a long, long, long time, so be that thousands of years. So, for example, making a brick is something that has been made by other, people in the same who kind of lived on the land that we are currently kind of living on. We're doing the same things that they would have been doing. So, like hand making bricks, baking a loaf of bread. The same process is sort of used. Same with making weaving a fabric. It's the same kind of processes, the same weaving structures. Or similar, and I think those are the things that I'm really interested in terms of like that collapse of time, and the vessels that were dug up from Must Farm for example, or that fabric that was uncovered as part of the archaeological dig, those objects could have been, they're almost so contemporary in that they could have, that you look at them and they could have almost been made yesterday. And that imprint of the person, I think, also is really something that I'm quite interested in, maybe that kind of like human error, the mistakes, the learning from that, and the imprints that are kind of left from the body on those things.
There's something about the simplicity of some of those vessels that you were showing us that almost make them incredibly contemporary.
Yeah.
So whilst creating new work, do you feel you can honour and respect what has been before, and do you feel a pressure to continue on that legacy? And if we go to Laura first for that, thanks.
So I suppose the way that I work, I try and do a lot of research, and it's important to me that I speak to people, you know, if it is site specific, I kind of work kind of with people that live in the area or have used that space, or experts or specialists. So I suppose for me it's about really understanding and learning firsthand. So for example, when it was working with the archaeological dig, it made sense for me to be working with the archaeologists and the brick quarry workers who are currently inhabiting and using those spaces. And in a way it's kind of how then the land has sort of worked. And then also learning about linen, for me it was important to kind of really understand those techniques by me physically learning to operate a hand loom, something that I had never sort of done before. And I think in terms of like, it was about honouring, I suppose, or how do you take those things from, that's the question, kind of how you take those things like do you, and I think it is, for me it's about understanding those things and not necessarily having to feel like you're tied to that past and that you have to do things in that way. I think it's also about thinking about how things can be, how you can adapt or kind of borrow things from the past to then think about the future. And I think it's something that, you know, we're continually across many different things, you know, learning about, and I think it is very, very helpful to look at what those things are, to inform how we use that, and even in how we kind of farming or kind of growing as well. It's kind of those things. I think it's important.
Amy, your approach to your creative work is influenced obviously by your connection to linen from past ancestors. Do you feel, if this relationship with linen had not already been there, do you think that your work might have taken a different path?
Yeah, like I feel like that, like where I kind of started with Kindred, that initial my final collection, that moment was kind of sparked me on that path and that kind of trajectory to creating like ultimately a heritage kind of Irish linen brand. But yeah, I guess I who knows, like I feel like aside from the personal connection I have to the linen industry, I like much kind of broader than that. It feels like almost like a real thing of kind of like national pride, and almost something that you really want to, you don't want to kind of see it die out. So yeah, I guess like fashion was always kind of something that I really wanted to do, but yeah, like working with, I love working with linen, and even at the minute, like from a sustainability kind of point of view, linen is probably one of the most sustainable fabrics you can work with, and that's such a topic of discussion at the minute, and really important in terms of like how we are kind of moving forward with it, you know, the environment and all of that. All of those things are really important. So I feel like aside from the kind of heritage aspect of things, it's actually just probably a really good move to work with a fabric that is really kind of durable and can kind of be passed on through generations. But is that
that's good. I have a few more questions here, but I'm probably going to throw it out and let other people ask some questions, and we can be very relaxed about this, and we can intertwine and ask questions as we go.
Anyone? Can you just move your mic up a little bit? It seems to be going in and out.
Is that better? Hello? Yeah? Can you hear me? No? Hello? Oh, okay. Sorry if you didn't hear anything that I said.
Does that come across okay? Yes. Thank you for your talks, that was very nice. I was interested in the Bronze Age cloth that was found at the archaeological site. Can you recommend any research books or a website that goes into that in more detail?
Yeah. Must Farm.
Sorry, how do you spell that?
MUST, so like
Must Farm.
And then farm. So Must Farm is the archaeological site, and it was run, kind of excavated by the Cambridge Archaeological Unit. They have like a project website, which I think it's like mustfarm.com or something like that. But if you Google it, they have where they had dig diaries. So there is also like a section which is on the textiles that they found. They're currently working on publishing the finds because it's very much a live dig still. It was, I think, Heritage England funded it, so they are going to be publishing a kind of volume on everything, so there'll be more stuff coming out fairly soon. The textiles were also shown as part of the Stonehenge exhibition at the British Museum. So I think there'll probably be some information in the catalogue there that was published as part of the Stonehenge exhibition.
Is Must Farm in Norfolk?
It's in kind of Norfolk, Cambridgeshire.
Oh yes.
Yeah, so it's not far from Peterborough. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? I'm going to go here first for accessibility of walking. Hey, what's your name?
Sorry. Thank you both for your presentations and your generous insights into your process. I was wondering what the idea of a reparative act. So it seems you could argue that our sense of time currently is very distorted. So do you view your connection with these longer processes, these heritages, as a reparative act in our relationship to time?
Great question. Would you use it for all the speakers? Okay, all the speakers, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, can I answer something? I suppose one thing that I guess I was sort of just in relation to, it was time you said, Mike? Yeah. So I think time is something that I'm really interested in. I know I've spoken a lot about this idea of like collapsed time. I think it's something that I've thought a lot about in the last 2 years, particularly as I've been doing this research into linen. It's in a way, it's actually, I mean, if there's any weavers in the room, but very time-based. You can very much see as you're going with the loom, you know, how things progress. So I think for me, it's something that I've been thinking a lot about, particularly that connection to my family history, the fact that it's on my mother's side, and then it's generations going back, and actually looking back, it's a very sort of very female, although it says in the census that the men did, I think they were engineers and things, but mainly it was women that would have been working in my family in those mills, and for me that's quite interesting, kind of thinking about that connection, not that something that my mum didn't know, but then also with me becoming a mother at the same time, and that time being kind of something that's very visible, growing your skills, kind of like learning and then coming out the other side of that. So I think I've been particularly thinking a lot about time and the piece that I made, the winding them winding, or winding them winding, visually kind of tracking that. Anyway, that's, I suppose.
Did anyone else have any comments on that?
So,
or we'll go to the next question?
Well, I was just going to say that for me at the minute, and through the work that I do, time I look at slightly differently. So with the work that I'm currently completing with Queens, because it's a subconscious thing, I think I'm more aware of things passing on a subconscious level rather than an actual time on a clock or days or weeks. So it's maybe the transfer of things that aren't spoken about or are very, very subtle in that way.
Sorry, I just wanted a question before.
Hello. My question's for Amy. Your collection is stunning, but I was just wondering, I'm also really interested in linen, just for uni. I was wondering, is there any point in, from seed to fabric that you actually can't do the work here in Ireland or anywhere, like you have to export it?
Yeah, so at the minute, all of the linen that I have access to and can kind of use, like none of that is actually grown here, like unfortunately. So it's such a pity when you think about how, like, in our not too like distant history, everything was kind of completed here. So, no, all of the linen that I use would be woven here, and all the kind of finishing stages would kind of happen here. But there is like a lot of kind of really interesting work happening, like kind of going into that kind of thing. So there's a farm, some of you might have heard of Malin Linen, and it's a couple who, Charlie and Helen Malin, who have a farm up in Cookstown in County Tyrone, and they have for the last few years kind of been growing flax and revisiting that process, and their kind of long-term desire would be to create linen that's kind of come from flax to fabric right here in Ireland. So I feel very hopeful for like what is kind of ahead in that way, and I feel like hopefully pretty soon, like definitely what those guys are doing is incredible, and hopefully soon we will have like linen that is completely kind of grown here. But yeah, unfortunately at the minute it's only kind of those like last kind of 3 stages that would happen here.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, that's perfect. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's-
Any questions? I'll go one and then 2. Assessing. Yes, sir, what's your question?
My question was about colour, and are there certain colours that are amenable to use with linen and others that are not? And is I'm wearing a linen shirt which is dyed dark blue, but have you experimented with colours? And another question would be about process. Have you incorporated any metal threads into your work, or like for buttonholes or anything like that, to hems and elbow patches or whatever? That's just a general sweep of things there.
Is that question for Amy or Laura?
It's for the general question.
Okay. General question.
In terms of colour, do you mean like meanings of colour? Is that what you?
Well, we're into autumn, and outside
yeah.
there are so many rustic reds and yellows and those tones.
Yeah, well, definitely for me, that like colour is it kind of, you can tell a real story with the colours that you use. So definitely like things like at the minute designing kind of an autumn winter collection, it would definitely be informed by surroundings, even like, and that our kind of landscapes are so beautiful as a whole, like that I take a lot of inspiration from that, and you can kind of really like part of my collections, like a real part of that, part of what I try to create with that is to use it as an opportunity to tell a real story of like our heritage and all of that. So and in my, like, as I kind of touched on with my final collection at university, it was like created with all tones of white, so that kind of spoke of that real like purity of the fabric, and like kind of going back to basics. So yeah, no, I love like thinking about the kind of deeper meaning of colour. And in terms of the metal threads, I haven't experimented with that yet, but that could be something I could think about in the future. But yeah, sounds interesting.
Incorporating things like metal thread, that could be something that's part of the weaving process. That could also be something that's sort of experimental weaving. Or do you want to sort of talk about it from a weaver's point of view, Laura?
Yeah, well, so I suppose in my experience so far with weaving, I have mainly focused on weaving with linen, I haven't introduced any metals or anything into it yet. Although when I was doing the kind of short weaving course that in 2019, I did experiment with slightly thicker and different materials, weaving plastic, fine materials and things into it. But in terms of more recently, I've been focusing on linen, and in particular working with a lot of undyed linen, unbleached linen, which I really enjoy working with. I suppose really interested in that kind of the honesty of the fabric of it, and trying to highlight the weaving structures. And I did bring in some colour in a way because I was working in a sort of block pattern, so I wanted to kind of be able to create sort of different textures and things by introducing different colours of yarn, but I limited the palette of that to sort of quite earthy tones so that it would go with this kind of undyed linen. So the warp itself was with an undyed linen. So yeah, and then I used a little bit of white as well in it. So I think perhaps that's yet to come. But in some of the test pieces I did use colour, but they were just ones that were sort of there.
I do have some experience of weaving or experimenting with linen and metal. I was very industry based at the time, and what we found was that you could weave with it, but once we started to put it through all the testing regulations that certain fabrics would have to pass, say, to become a garment, that the metal started to break down. So it was never going to be something that was a bulk product. It would be more refined, maybe used in a more visual arts sense rather than within industry or being sort of high street or designer led.
The question sprung into mind from something around 2015. I think it was the household exhibition in the Alma Road. I came across a textile artist who was weaving in the living room textiles with different metals in them, which were very popular.
Yes.
He got a great commission from India.
Very good.
But I was startled by the work and what she was up to, and just the mechanics of it were stunning.
Yeah, you can find that when you would maybe weave with Laura's type of loom that you can introduce some really amazing things. They tend to be more visual arts rather than, say, maybe what Amy does with regard to having to have certain wash standards, or when you have to adhere to certain levels of specifications.
Weaving's pretty remarkable in that you can, you build up all these threads and somehow you have a surface and you have a thing, where before it was just a thing. Anyway, go to the other question that we had. Do you want to ask?
I suppose, Amy, maybe you'd answer, but I'd be intrigued for all of you because, you're successful Northern Irish women, but we're obviously all here on a fashion degree, and a lot of the feedback that I'm getting from people who work in industry at the minute is that you can't actually, one girl said, if you want to be successful, you want to make any money, you're going to have to leave Northern Ireland, you're going to have to leave, maybe go to Europe, and I'm just wondering if you think that there's a space for us all here to, actually, I don't particularly want to leave, and I'd like to, with confidence, know that I can stay here and work in fashion in particular, and if you think that's possible for all of us,
Yeah, absolutely. I was in that position whenever I was at uni. I was under the impression that I had to, once I graduated, there was in terms of kind of jobs, even in Dublin, it feels like there's probably more job opportunities in that kind of industry, but certainly in Northern Ireland, unless you wanted to do Irish dance costumes, it didn't really feel like there was very much, which I wasn't that interested in. But definitely I would say that it feels like Northern Ireland is this almost kind of creative hub, and there's so much kind of skill and talent here that's really kind of celebrated, and it's such a great kind of
time in terms of like social media, what you can kind of build online. Like you can definitely be based here, but like I like get orders from like have quite a significant customer base in North America and kind of all over. So it is that thing where I definitely don't feel like you have to leave, and it really excites me to think about Northern Ireland in a way, like in terms of the future, like how we actually could be really, like there's a lot of support for kind of creative industries here, and like even just amongst each other. Like even I work with the most incredible like photographers and people who like do websites and branding, all of those kind of creative industries, and I never have to look further than kind of like Northern Ireland for that, you know. So I definitely think that you can 100% stay at home, and that's something from like that really excites me even about kind of growing Kindred, is because I was in that position, like even being able to hopefully offer kind of job opportunities. And I think the more people that do that, then you kind of think of the generations coming ahead who were once in your position, and it's really quite nice to think that you could build something that then they could be a part of, and using those kind of skills. Because on my course there were like 65 fashion and textile graduates, and a lot of them have kind of gone away, but most of them probably to work in fashion. But I definitely think that it's changing in that way. I think there's a different kind of time here now, which is exciting.
Email address for you then?
What is it?
I should write down my email address.
Yeah, exactly. Please do. I know finding seamstresses is so difficult. So yeah, if you can so talk to me after.
Like your style. Laura, did you maybe want to comment on someone who has left and sort of outside Ireland, and the part of the perspective is obviously had your show here recently, and it's not that the arts is related but not fashion, but maybe give your perspective of someone who's left, what do you think of sort of situation for new grads?
Yeah, so I left when I left school, and I went to art school in London, as I kind of talked about in my talk. But I think, you know, that was pretty much almost 20 years ago, and I think the landscape has very much changed here. I think 20 years ago it was quite different, or it felt like that to me at the time. And I think more broadly in the arts, there's a decentralisation, particularly like in England anyway, that not everything is in London. There's a much more kind of more projects are happening, exhibitions, really, really exciting things are happening all over regionally. So, and I think that is, as you mentioned, like helped by social media, and particularly in Northern Ireland, I think there's just so much more things happening now, and you probably feel that as a student here. There's probably loads of things. There's exhibitions, you know. There's some brilliant galleries, and for me, as I mentioned, coming here to do the exhibition at CCA, it felt like I was just so excited to be working here and having a really significant show here at a gallery that is as good as any of the galleries in London. You know, the team there is amazing, and to be also to make a work that was so connected for me to my family, and to work with my mum and make that piece of work was really, I don't know, very significant for me. And I do think that there is space in Northern Ireland here, so I think you guys are here at such an exciting time, and there's so many opportunities, I think it's really, it's good. So I do think there's a huge drive to you don't need to, you know, move to Dublin or move to London.
Jill, did you want to add to that comment? I think it's quite relevant for, you know, certainly what we want to achieve is in LA, you know, fostering, like bringing back all these things here, and, you know, you've worked as a designer and an artist for 25 years here, mainly.
Here, yes.
Yeah, what do you kind of think of the question?
I used to have to do a lot of travel, but really I think that it comes down to COVID has really opened up and shifted the whole market rather more quickly than what it was already going. I think it was heading that way, but I think COVID just put the
accelerator on it, and suddenly everybody had to alter and change. And I think through that now everything has opened much more than what it had been before. And I think it's an exciting time, as you say, because we're only getting through that acceleration period, and we're now moving into a new way of being really within the arts here, and with the internet and what Amy's doing, and you really are going to have an open market. So to choose your business around what you do will be much easier than what it has been previously.
Any other audience questions, or do you have any points to sort of, or questions to ask to sort of finish up, or just maybe at 10 minutes to 4?
I have a question, actually. I'm going to throw at Amy because I think that people would maybe be interested in it. You spoke about intergenerational clothing, and I think it comes across as important to you. Could you explain this and how that intergenerational clothing, how you see it working, and just let everybody know really what your vision for that is?
Yeah, so intergenerational clothing like that's really at the forefront of whenever I'm designing, because like my kind of customer ranges from like 18 right up until like, there was a lady in my studio like a few weeks ago who was getting something for her 80th birthday party, and she was like so cool, she looked like 60, but yeah, so it is that thing where it's creating, I think it's about creating like really timeless pieces, and a lot of the pieces that I create can kind of be worn in multiple ways. So the shirts, I've kind of designed a lot of shirts, they kind of sell really well, but a lot of them, most of them can be worn with the buttons like to the front as a traditional shirt, or reversed and like worn completely differently. So it is that thing in terms of designing like sustainably as well. If you're like parting with quite a bit of money for something, it's nice to know that you can kind of wear it in multiple ways, and it is that idea of people kind of being able to add their own personality to it. So in terms of design, I keep things quite classic and multifunctional, so that like you can wear them kind of with anything. Like a classic white shirt will look good on anyone of any kind of age. And then as well as that, it's kind of designing with that idea of these things could be like passed down, and that's kind of the whole idea of kindred as well, and passing down to your own kind of kin. And I think that's also kind of really important in terms of sustainability, all of that, and investing in pieces that you feel will be around for years. You won't just like chuck them out whenever you're kind of done with them. And as well, like a lot of our pieces, it really, like if you, even the dress that's hanging up there, it really, when you look at it closely, it really speaks of like craftsmanship and an actual person who's like, created that little crochet trim, all of that. And I think it's the idea of really creating pieces that you really treasure and that feel really special. And yeah, just that kind of timelessness, is that kind of the question answered. But I think that kind of timelessness and anyone of any age really being able to wear them. Yeah.
Laura, I had a really interesting project where I had to work alongside a painter. My learning practice, I think, from that was that she and I worked extremely parallel right through the creative process until the very end, where she completely wanted to deconstruct everything and tear it apart. And I was completely horrified. You have had so many lovely collaborations with so many different people. Is there anything that was of interest or that stands out that you would maybe like to share with people? Even if it's something that made you laugh or something that you learned, or...
Trying to think. It's interesting because I think, I've had so many kind of different collaboration, working relationships, and with different people, and many of those are for years, and I come back to them and work with them again. I suppose I'm trying to pick one, but maybe Mark Knight, actually, the the archaeologist that I worked with on the Must Farm archaeological dig from Cambridge, I remember the first time I met him, so he was kind of, because we worked obviously together for 2 years, but I really don't feel like our conversations have stopped. And so we met for the first time in there's a gallery called Kettle's Yard in Cambridge, which if you haven't been to, it's incredible. It's they have a sort of gallery, and then there's a house which is attached to it, and you go in and it's basically everything's kind of, it's lots of art collection, and anyway, it's very magic. You have to ring a bell to go in. Anyway, he doesn't live very far from there, so we met in the cafe there. We've not met before, and I think he was quite unsure of how to talk to me. He hadn't worked with an artist before, or he was a bit like, what is she gonna? Why does she want to make contact with me? And although we'd been introduced by Dr. Melanie Giles, who is another archaeologist, and he knows Leslie. We'd been introduced, and so we met, and I think I could see his body language was just a bit like, what's going on? And he kind of interrogated me whenever we first met. What did I do? And he really, really drilled down into questions, like why, and which was very interesting. And he told me all about his research, and this was prior to kind of working together, and I kind of left the meeting and I was like, I don't know if this is going to work, And I think because in my previous works that I've made, it really is about finding the right collaborator, and that kind of, because for me, I'm often working with people over quite a long period of time. I suppose it's like how you have built those relationships with the people that run the mills and things like that, and it's important that there's some kind of for me, this kind of common language, even if it's an unspoken common language, or a kind of understanding or an shared interest. And I remember coming away from that meeting feeling really nervous, and I was like, oh gosh, I've made this proposal, and if he decides not to work with me, well then, what am I going to do? Anyway, I got a call from him the next day, and he's like, okay, let's do this. And from then on, we just, he was very open and sharing his research, but it was also very much a kind of two-way relationship, I suppose, the way that he has this relationship with the brick quarry workers, and that they're working in a very different way, and I'm working in a very different way to Mark is, but there is this kind of shared language, and Mark and I would frequently have these very long conversations on the phone where he would ask me very odd questions about my work, but in a way it really contributed to my research, and I think also to his research. I mentioned to someone in the audience about that they're publishing this kind of their findings and things like that, and Mark, I've yet to see what it is, all of that yet, but he said to me that working with him has also kind of contributed to his research and helped him think about his work and the archaeological dig in a different way, in a way that he wouldn't have maybe done. So I don't know, that for me that's been, I don't know if I've quite answered the question, but I suppose for me it's been a really important kind of collaboration, and those conversations were really important, and I think Mark and I continue to have them even though that work finished in 2020. We've kind of continued to work, and actually I had I was invited to contribute a recipe to a recipe book, and it was published by Fiden. It's about artists who make work and food in the studio and things like that, and so I made this recipe up which is called the humbova, and it's basically a bit like a pavlova, but it's made with humbugs, hence the name humbova. Anyway, it was very much I kind of thought about these layers and layers of the archaeological dig and time, and anyway, I spoke to Mark a lot about the humbova, and during COVID went on the train with a humbova to go and deliver one to him as well. So anyway, I'm not sure if I quite answered your question.
It sounds like you push boundaries.
Between travel with pavlovas on train.
Yeah, the conversations. Yes, absolutely.
I think that's actually, just conscious of time, I think that's a really nice note to end on, if no one else has any burning questions from the audience or anything. Because just to sum up, for the Linen Biennale, because I've gotten on about it all the time, we wouldn't be here today without partnerships, with makers, and artists, designers, organisations like the museum, people who've done the research, people who are doing fantastic projects to try and bring back, growing flags and passing on skills, teaching skills, like all of these things, like, the Biennale is nothing without any of them. So, one thing that we've really been trying to push in the programming is that, linen is not just tablecloths and napkins, it is so much more. There's really innovative fashion, there's in so many designs, it's got all these fantastic material properties, there's artists approaching it from really innovative point of views. So I'm going to do any final remarks. I'm going to put the evaluation thing online on the screen, or there's little paper sheets or other forms for you to sign, because we really need your feedback on how you think any of your events have gone, any ideas that you have, in order to try and keep this work going, because this has been about material inheritance, and our legacy and inheritance of linen in this part of the world is so extreme that it would be such a shame to let it go and to not really talk about it and champion it. So I want to say thank you to all of our speakers for